Hey everybody, today we're going to talk about Revit journal files and extracting that data with Python and viewing it with Power BI. Uh, I'll show you, this turned into a bigger PowerPoint than I wanted it to be, but there's a lot of good information in it, I think, and we'll spend time actually in Jupyter Notebook for a little bit and then also in Power BI showing you kind of what that looks like. But I hope that you take away that journal files for Revit and log files in general can be really helpful when it comes to troubleshooting issues with Revit, but also Revit, and if you're using log files from other tools, how they can be useful. But the the application that I show you today, and I'm going to be extracting room and space information, may not be applicable to you. But again, Revit journal files, text files, log files for Revit and other tools can be really beneficial. But also, I think a big takeaway from this is how incredibly powerful Python and Power BI are. I love Python and I love Power BI, and I think they're tools, and you don't have to use Python to use Power BI or vice versa, but they're tools that can be really impactful, and I use them almost every day. And I hope that by showing you this example, you can think of, even if this example that I show you today isn't something you could use, I hope you can think of ways you can use these tools at your own firm in your own way that can help you and your team. So let's get into it. So before I dive into this workflow, because I don't want to lead you guys down the wrong path, or if you're expecting something to be really easy and to give you all the answers, it's not. There's a lot of stuff that you have to build into this workflow to make it work for you. But there are options out there, and this is probably not all of them, but these are tools I personally have used. So some, and I mentioned here some better options. Better depending on what you're trying to do. BIMbeats, incredible tool. I recommend Googling it, looking into it, and seeing if that's a tool that you would like, because what it does is it pulls in, not just like I mentioned previously, like log files in general can be helpful. That tool pulls in log files from Revit, from Navisworks if you're using that, AutoCAD, and a number of other tools. They have the list on their website. Really cool tool. Recommend checking it out. I just think looking at their website and seeing what it can do would be helpful, because those tools are incredible. A lot of people don't know they exist, things like that. So Imagine It Clarity, that's another one. Now, it does not specifically extract log files that I am aware of, but it has some functionality built into it to where if you install the add-in for your designers and the different users in your firm, it will track some metrics, and then it has a really cool database export, so you can dump out the entire Revit database into a server, and then you can query like a bunch of models, or one project, but query a bunch of different categories. There's all sorts of cool ways you can leverage that tool. Love both of these tools. So I recommend Googling them and just seeing what they can do and see if they can help you. And I talked a bit about the workflow, but I wanted to kind of show you guys a visual of what I'm talking about. So we've got a text file, and essentially that's supposed to represent the Revit journal file. And then here we've got the Python bit along with Jupyter Notebook. So Jupyter Notebook is like a documentation tool, and I've got a slide for this just so for folks that don't know what that is. I like to write stuff in it because it's just easy and it's fun, and visually you can create some really cool things that you can share with people pretty easily. I do use VS Code from time to time, or Visual Studio Code, depending on what I'm doing. So I've got a few different tools and how when I'm working with code. But if you're visually trying to show something or document a process with that you're using code with, Jupyter Notebook could be a really good tool. So just wanted to mention that, and I've got a slide to talk a bit more about that. Excel, so we'll be actually dumping that information out into Excel. Now you could put that information anywhere, really. You could put it in SQL. You could put it in a text file. There's all sorts of data sources you could put it. But in this example, we dump it out to Excel, and then finally we read that information with Power BI. All right, so Revit journal files, think of it as a log file. This was not written by me. I highlighted this piece here. Here's the link if you want to check out. Oops. Let's go back to that. If you want to check this, it's a longer post. So if you want to learn more about journal files, I recommend checking out this link here. But this here that I highlighted, it says this can be used to diagnose faults and issues, and is often requested by Autodesk should you contact them for support. So, and some folks don't know, if you have a reseller, you may have support through them. Like I have ATG, other firms may have Imagineit or US CAD. Those are just some that I can think of. And sometimes they will offer support with your contract, and I've had to send journal files to them, or just whenever I'm asking for something that I'm trying to troubleshoot, I'll just go ahead and send that to them, because it's always really helpful for them to know what's going on. So, but anyways, that's a brief blurb of what a journal file was. What is Power BI? I just did this more for fun. I wanted to see what ChatGPT would dump out. If you don't know what ChatGPT is, I recommend checking it out. It's super cool. I probably get in there once a day. But I asked it what Power BI is in simple terms. And I thought this was a pretty cool write-up. It talks about how it's an interactive or that you can use it to create and share interactive dashboards, reports, charts. Talks about visual interface for creating and designing reports and dashboards. So really cool. And something I would add to this is that, I'm a fan of Power BI. I've shared it with many people. I've heard folks that are more familiar with the data side say, how's this different than me just opening up an Access and then just looking at the data, or the source itself and just viewing the data. And I would say that this lowers the barrier to leverage power at a larger, or the power of data at a larger scale. So you have a tool like this that can look at, and I'll talk about some of my own uses, but you have a tool like this that can look at various different sources and then be able to give that to somebody so they can then take action, whereas before it might have been too difficult from a technical perspective, or just too manual if they had to look at the actual database or the sources where that data comes from. So examples of how I use Power BI, and I'm talking about this to just give you guys a well-rounded reason why Power BI and this workflow, and why, aside from just using it for this example, why Power BI, Python, log files can be used to help you. So here are some of the uses I have. We have a skill survey that we put out at my firm, and I was able to pull that data into Power BI, easily visualize it, but also connect it into other data sources. We have a project software and BIM spent, which is production labor. So we're able to identify our projects that are doing better, if they're either using CAD or Revit. How are they doing production wise? Like, how are we spending less money on those projects, here or there? And so we can use that as a KPI. Say we've got one for Revit or AutoCAD to determine if a team is either using CAD primarily or Revit. We have some information about BIM lead stuff, and then I mentioned BIM survey results. These are actually the same thing pretty much. So Jupyter Notebook, because we'll open that, I wanted to mention it here. This is just from their website, but you can create some really interactive documentation. I've done that on my LinkedIn channel before. So my LinkedIn account, I've created articles where I've referenced Jupyter Notebook documents that I've created. So I've done them. I think they're really cool. You can create some really interesting things, and sometimes it's hard for people to, like, here's a program with 1,000 lines of code. Now let's talk about it. It's like, oh, you lost me already as soon as you opened up the document. Well, Jupyter Notebook, you can see, like in this example image from their site, it's just one line of code and it outputs that visualization. And so you're focusing on more than just code, but exploring maybe some specific thing with data or some other thing. But you can see where a tool like this could be really useful. I mentioned before some other options. So I am using regex to actually parse the file. So I use Python, and then I loop through the lines in the journal file, and then I use regex to capture a pattern of characters that match this here. So that's the pattern, and then I want to grab essentially that from the journal file and just count it. That's what I'm doing in this, but I did want to mention a few other options for parsing log files in case you want to try a different thing on your own or try some other tool. So log parser lizard, that was a tool I never tried before. I downloaded it, and you could see here I tried something. I did some queries. I don't know if these queries are like SQL queries, which I don't know those, but I've seen like tons of posts about how easy SQL queries are. So it could be worth going down this avenue if you want to like parse a bunch of log files, but I don't know. But I wanted to share it with you guys because I thought it was an interesting tool. It's supposed to like specifically parse log files, and you can pass in a bunch of different ones. Grok, I don't know much about this one, but it popped up in one of my searches, and I am familiar with the Elastic Stack, or in here it says Elk Stack, but it's the Elastic Stack, and that might be the underlying tool for parsing a bunch of files. So I just wanted to mention that, so in case you guys want to dig into it. Logstash, this will parse and transform your data. I think Logstash is some of the nodes or some of the beats that BIMBeats uses leverage Logstash. I could be wrong and all that. I've used BIMBeats quite a bit, and I was getting into a lot of that before, but it's been months since I've had a chance to dig into that stuff. So I would recommend Googling some of that stuff if it's interesting to you. An easier option is maybe this journal analyst tool for Dynamo. It was by Andy Dandy, and I would say it's pretty simple. There's a lot of stuff in Python in it if you open it, but you can see here that it just has some simple, like you pass in a file path, and we could probably get a list of file paths if you had like tons of journal files you want to analyze at once. You pass the path into here, and then you pass that journal output into one of these inputs. This is not all of them. There's a lot more, but you can see here kind of what some of these are. Like we've got Revit version. This was ran. If you know Dynamo pretty well, you probably know this is Revit 2022 I'm working out of. But this is I'm checking a 2023 journal file. So I just wanted to point that out. As you can see, you can check journal files for multiple years with this tool. So anyways, I thought, like, if there's you install this, you see that there maybe is a need, like, oh, this is the specific data point I need. Well, I'm just going to do it in Dynamo and call it a day. That's easy enough, rather than jumping into Jupyter Notebook or creating some Python script. That tool might do it for you. I think this is the last one. Revit Journal Parser. Last night I was laying in bed, and I wanted to Google some parsers to see if I missed anything, and I stumbled on this. There's a repo. The GitHub repo is right here. So if this tool looks interesting to you, I recommend checking it out. Now, heads up, I did play around with it, and I ran into some errors. I have not had a chance to dig into those errors and see if they're easy fixes. There were some index errors and some lists that were out of range and things. So if you're not familiar with Python, you may run into some issues trying to use this tool. Now, again, I haven't played with it a ton, so there could be something I'm doing wrong, but just a heads up if you take this route. But it looks like a pretty slick tool, and that's a snippet of like the code, some of it, but it's a pretty big Python script, and you'll have to check it out if you're into those kinds of things, and take a look at it yourself. But you can see the dialogue there. It looks kind of interesting. So yeah, that was it for that. Now, if you're interested in Revit journal files and learning more about how they can help you do your job, like if you're a BIM manager, maybe you're a designer and you don't have a BIM person at your firm, or if you just want to learn this to just be better with Revit and to know how to troubleshoot it better, you may want to check out these resources, because they're pretty dang good. I've looked at all of these, and they've helped me quite a bit, and I still reference them. So check these out, and if you know of others, please comment below and just let me know if there's resources you use for troubleshooting Revit journal files, and just comment that so other folks can see it. So there's that. I'm going to mention this since this slides up. This is the Discord server. Join it. We have a much bigger community now. I think we're at 600 something. There's a lot of cool channels in there, and a lot of people talk about cool stuff. So check that out if you want to join it. The link's here, but it's also in the description below. So check that out. And yeah, so now that we're done with that part of it, I'm going to jump into the and this is the Power BI output, but I want to jump into Jupyter Notebook because that's the first step. And I've already ran everything, and so there's not going to be much we need to do at Power BI. So we'll just look at the code and talk about it. But really, there's not a ton here. I think it's pretty straightforward for the most part, and we'll just go through it. So, all right, so I'm using Pandas. Pandas is used to create the data frame so I can dump it out into Excel. That's pretty much all it does. And then the regex is for the trying to find the characters in the journal file that we're after. In this case, I'm looking for spaces and rooms not properly enclosed. We're looking for that error. Now, you could replace this for anything that you're specifically looking for. But again, I want you to keep in mind while I go through this that this isn't the only way you can use this. There's plenty of cool and amazing ways you can leverage Python and Power BI. So this next part is I'm using TK-Enter, which is like a UI tool, to just pop up and there's actually probably a better way to do this. I wanted to create a dialogue, but you can see here, this is what opens. I wanted to create something cooler, but I didn't spend too much time on that part of it, because this pretty much gets us what we need. So I'm going to click on this Journal 24, and this is what I know has these errors in it, so that's why I'm choosing that one. I'm going to click open. That's just going to stay there, and that is ran. And now what we're going to do is just verify that we have the information. This is from a previous run, but we want to make sure that it is actually, that variable is holding the correct information. So we'll do Shift Enter, and then boom, we can see I've got the right information. So I always like to check variables in there just to see, and then I may leave things like this for other people if they're trying to use these notebooks, and as just nice reminders that, hey, check the variable before you move forward. And this is a simple case, but there's other things that you do, like you build this code to check, or this function to check this thing or whatever. But I don't know, I find it helpful. So here's the pattern. This is pretty messy in my opinion. I'm not a fan of regex. I think it's incredibly powerful. Let me take that back. I'm a fan of it. I'm not a fan of just the learning curve and having to, all the troubleshooting it takes for me to get it right. And that's more on me than the tool itself. So it's incredibly powerful. And I mentioned the PowerPoint. I wanted to say Power BI, but PowerPoint, that's what I used. So this is a free tool. This is the website, so check that out if you want to play around with this tool. But this, to me, was really helpful. I opened the journal file, and I copied the text I want. So this is a snippet from the journal file. You can see error posted, room is not in properly enclosed region. I took that text and I put it here. And then all these different colors are different patterns and different ways that you can create this regex pattern. So I found it really useful, because I don't know regex really at all. So, or my knowledge is very limited on it, and I just don't use it that often either. So I found the tool really helpful. So from there, we've got our spaces or rooms. This is just a empty list that we're going to update with information. And then this down here is just going to open the journal file 24 in this case, and it's going to read it line by line, and it's going to check. So that's regex.search, and then it's going to check the line for this pattern here, the pattern we determined up here that I generated from the regex generator. And then from there, I just say, if this is true, go ahead and append that line into spaces or rooms. Now, what I should have done here is check to see if it was a space or room, because I end up separating those later on down here. And actually, you know what? For the heck of it, or for just for fun, and since let's just go ahead and try to do that. And really, I should only have to do this. And we'll just see what happens. If it messes up, then I'm just going to move forward. I don't want to try to troubleshoot this. We'll take that out, put that in here, and then we'll go ahead and run that, see if there's any errors. So string is not defined. Where is string if yeah, because I called the line string. So let's switch this to line. Switch this to line. Okay, let's switch that to one more. All right, let's go ahead and just check this. Rooms, there's our room IDs. Oops, don't know what I'm spelling there. Spaces, and there's our space IDs. So, and that's what we're doing here when we're doing line.split is actually I'm grabbing the actual element ID that gave that error. So just so that we can see both, I want to show you guys the actual string, like the full string before it's parsed. So we'll just do rooms space, and then we'll just do line, press enter, shift enter. Let's place that right there, and then you can see the output there. That's the actual string, and then we're just pulling the element ID, and then you can see all the errors for rooms and for spaces. So pretty cool. And this isn't like I may use this, but I would want to be parsing a bunch of information that's relevant to troubleshooting. I think major errors are really valuable, but this showed up a ton in the Revit journal file, and so I thought it would be fun to try to parse it and grab the IDs. But you may be looking for errors or something else. So, you can change this pattern to whatever you want to grab. And then create a bunch of different patterns to grab all sorts of information. All right, so I forgot I had this here too. So this is just getting a like a range of items in the list. In this case, it's just 5. We can skip this because we've already got our rooms and spaces. And actually, I can just cut this out. And then I'll just leave this. And then you guys can use it however way you want if you want to actually download this and play with it. So down here, all this is going to do is take the total of the rooms and the spaces and then return the count, so the total. So we've got 162 rooms in this journal, and then we've also got 154 spaces. And these numbers, I don't know if they're doubled up or because that error was shown multiple times in different sessions, or multiple times for a project, or because that error, I mean, I could clean up a bunch of stuff, and if it's not actively checking the model to see, it's just you may have a wildly over, like that might be wildly over what's actually going on in the model. So keep that in mind with these errors. And log files, in my experience, can sometimes be messy, and so you got to know what you're looking for and what you're trying to learn from it, or what you're trying to take from it so that you can do some other action or whatever. So just keep in mind they can be messy, and depending on how you're parsing it may give you different outputs. So like I said before, the data or pandas was just used for creating the data frame. This df spaces, I have this equals pd.series, and I passed in spaces instead of just doing like what we did with rooms. Because spaces is shorter than rooms, is what you have to do in pandas to have it included in the same data frame. Now, it may make more sense to dump this out as 2 separate Excels. I don't know, but this was pretty easy. And you may not know what I'm talking about, but when you try to put 2 different data frames together like this, like 2 different columns, and one has less data than the other, what's going to happen is you're going to get an error. So if we go ahead and do Shift Enter, you can see here that it tells us that the length of the values 154 does not match length of index 162, because the index of the index is being determined by the rooms, and it doesn't, like, it's 162 and our spaces are 154. And even if we switch that, it would still give us that error. And I mean switch, like if we made, spaces, which is shorter, and then the rooms, which is longer, it doesn't just start to add extra indexes. So if we do pd.series, that essentially fixes the issue. And that was just something I Googled, and I think I found it on Stack Overflow or something, and it just creates like empty rows right after. Like, you'll have a bunch of rooms, and you'll have a bunch of empty rows for the spaces. And then this df head essentially is a range from the first to whatever number. I think by default it does 5. So you can see that. And then this last one, so we take that data frame and then we just write it to Excel. So df.toExcel, this is the name, and then this is our just a variable that's seeing if you want to add an index or not. In this case, we don't. So there's times where you might, but this doesn't make any sense. So that writes to the location of the Jupyter file. In this case, it's with the all the other files for this video. And so if you needed to, you could put the full path, but in this case, that's where I wanted it. So the other thing to look at now is Power BI. So this is pretty straightforward. I'm not going to dive really that much into this, but I wanted to talk about these visualizations that you see here. This one is really powerful, and let me place it. So this is a slicer, and if we place it, and then if I go over here and just grab one of the data points, we can see that by default it doesn't have this search. I think this is really, really cool. So I've got a lot of dashboards that I've set up that I need to filter like layers of data to get to what I'm trying to view. And so what I'll do is I'll set these up and I'll set them as searches. And then from here, you can just click on the data point, and then you can click on another one, and then you can continue doing that. Now, this is a terrible example, but I wanted to mention that if you guys start to build your own, just how powerful those can be. I'm going to delete that. So this isn't... I wish this was a cooler dashboard for you guys, a cooler example, but this is it. It's just a bunch of element IDs. It doesn't really matter. But you can see how if we click on one, it filters it. So that's kind of cool. I'm not super sure about why that's showing because they don't match. So I'm not sure if it's just got to show like a single number. I don't know. Anyways, those are the slicers, and then here we've got our like cards, I think they're called. Yep, cards, and I'm just summing up like the total. So we've got 163 and then 155. Let's jump back into Jupyter Notebook and just look at that. So we've got 162, 154. What's probably happening, if I imagine, is maybe it's including the room. Yep. So, and then this one's probably including the space. Yep. So it's including that as a row. And I don't know what specific examples or specific issues you may run into, but just as a tip, like when you need to edit the data, so say you have your data exported, or if it's like a source that you have no control over, then things like this you can't just go change the source, but you can change it in Power BI pretty easily. So if we go here to I don't know why I am like blanking, but if you click on edit query, this is going to take you here, and this is where you can actually apply a number of different steps. So we've got source, navigation, renamed columns, and then because originally it was column 2 and column 1, but we could come here and remove this value or replace the value in some way. Maybe we replace it with like, can we just replace it with nothing? Yeah, let's do it over here too. Okay. And you can see over to the right, applied steps, replaced value. And if you click on previous steps, it's like going back in time. I don't know. I think this is super cool. And I just really love it. And then you've got your settings wheel over there if you've got to change something. All right, so there's that. Let's go back, close this. Yeah, it's still reading that. So another way to go about this, so that's one way, and it's probably better to edit the query and change it in there than, especially when you're working with tons of data. Like I've worked with millions and millions of data points, and in there you want to optimize the query, or even on the back end, like create your own SQL view or something. But since, let's see if I can go back. Or no, that doesn't work. We need to go back and edit the query. Just remove these steps. Come back up here, close and apply. Okay, and then we can just set up a filter. And so we can do a filter on this page, and we'll go ahead and just put that there, and then put this we'll do an advanced filter for this one. And then is this rooms? So we'll just do does not contain rooms, apply filter. We'll see that gets updated, and then we'll come down here, do the same thing, spaces, apply. We'll see that gets updated. So I use filters all the time. You've got filters for specific, like for pages, you have filters for all pages, and then you have even filters for specific visualization. So if you click on one, you can see filters on this visualization, or for this visual. So you could do, filters can be really powerful. Like I have one at my firm where I'm looking at the employee database, and I want to filter down to my team. And so there's a number of data points associated to every employee, where they, what sector they're on, what market, all these different things that I can use to filter out information. And depending on what I'm doing, I may want that to be like a filter that doesn't ever change. So I filter down to my team, and then I have like these slicers on my dashboard that are used for other reasons. So for filtering down even further into my team, which that might be something I do more often than having to do one of these overall filters. So anyways, those are just more tips on just using Power BI in general. But and then the last visual here is this bar chart. So you can see what that is, and it's just another way to view the data. So anyways, this video is already long enough, but this is kind of, you can see Power BI is incredible, but what's so cool about it is just how easy it is. Like the barrier is really low. Now obviously you can get really complicated with it when you start to do like really complicated measures, or like start to edit build a bunch of relationships between different data sets. But I think it's a pretty easy tool. Like anybody could use this. I would encourage anybody, if you haven't tried it, to try it. And then if you tried it and it is easy for you, encourage other people to try it. It's a really powerful tool. And Tableau, I think, is another option. So there's various tools out there. You can even use Python to create some cool dashboards, but that's not as easy as Power BI, I think. So anyways, that's what I've got. Like I said, join the Discord. That's a really cool community. Also, if you like this stuff, subscribe, like, share it with others, comment, and yeah, I will see you guys in the next video.